Hey guys, in this video I'm going to go over a quick React website that I made using React, TypeScript, and Vite to make this top Twitch streams by chat website. This is actually the third part of my Twitch chat stats producer series. So what this website does is it lists all of the data that I have stored over that past 24 hours of our Twitch chat messages. So in this case, we've got around 5 million Twitch messages from about 564,000 unique users. It also shows the average number of bits donated per message, as well as the total number of bits donated across all of the messages in the database. We've got our top 10 Twitch streamers right here. So for example, we could click on Queso and it would actually show his Twitch stream right here. And then we've also got a search for streamer function. So if I wanted to search for somebody like Kai Cenat, we could see that there's actually 113 messages in the database related to Kai Cenat. So this video is just going to be a quick code overview, an overview of the website, which we kind of already just did, and an overview of deployment. So the reason I made this website is so I had a visual overview of the two projects that I had already worked on that I've posted videos about before, which would be this Twitch stats producer and then the associated Twitch chat stats API. Now that I've got this front end, it kind of ties the entire project together. So starting with our app TSX, you can see it's a pretty standard app TSX. I've got some background gradients defined here, as well as some use queries. This use query is what I'm actually going to be using to call fetch to go get our streamer metadata and use that Twitch chat API that I just showed you. Then I essentially have a pretty basic grid layout with some motion box components just for some animations. I did want to point out that I do have a constants file. You can see here my API base URL is the API URL that we generated from the previous video. And then I've got all of my endpoints laid out here inside of this API endpoints constant. I've also got a couple of animations that I use throughout the website defining constants as well. Now moving on to each component, starting with the intro section. I first define some colors, and then you can see here I'm using use query to go to my overview endpoint. This overview endpoint data is eventually rendered into a motion box, which is where we're able to show things like the total messages and the unique users. Moving on down to the streamer search component, I again define more colors as well as a couple of state variables for the search terms. I have a basic debounce function here to let us have a little bit of delay before we actually search and query the API for the search term. I again use query to be able to reach out to my API endpoints chat endpoint, and then I use the channels query parameter here to be able to search for the debounce search term. Then once I've got the data, I create a render streamer card function that actually will render the card or the list of streamers that is found with a link to their associated Twitch stream. And then we're able to put all of those streamers inside of this render streamer table. And then finally, again, I'm going to take all of that data and return it inside of a motion box just for some animations. Moving on down to bit stats. After we define our colors and some padding, we can very easily just return another motion stat component. This motion stat component is actually going to be rendered inside of this motion box all the way down here. And again, we're essentially doing the same thing. We're going to use query and go to our bits endpoint. We're going to load our data. And once we have the data, we can actually render it inside of this motion box. And finally, we have our top streamers component. So first I make sure to define a streamer interface, which is just mirroring the data that is already set. This is just to enforce type consistency. We've got a couple of sort field and sort directions, a couple of colors, and then this will actually be the rows that we return for the actual streamers. You can see here, we check for the broadcast type and make sure to render that conditionally. We again have that link to their Twitch profile, as well as things like their image and their name. And then what's cool here is that whenever we start to actually load and query the streamer data, we can memoize that data. We'll pull our top streamer data from our API and we'll put it into merge streamers. This is really just because we want to make sure we have things like the image in the description and the broadcast type inside of that table. And then based off the sort direction, we could sort either ascending or descending. And again, that's pretty much it, guys. It's a relatively simple website. I think the thing I like the most about things like React and other MVC frameworks is just the fact that you can compartmentalize everything into these little components. That way, whenever we go to things like our app TSX, we literally can just load this bit stats component or this top streamers component, for example. One last thing I always like to talk about before we finish the video is the CI/CD or the deployment process. Again, if you've watched any of my content from now, you can see this is very similar to a lot of the other CI/CD that I usually use. We essentially want to make sure that we are only running this CI/CD on merged pull requests into the main branch. We're essentially going to set up Node.js. We're going to install our dependencies. We're going to run a build command, which is in our package.json. You can see right here our build command that's in package.json. And then I am using render.com to host this at the moment. So we're going to make a curl, a post to our render deploy hook that is in our GitHub repo secrets. And that's pretty much it. I mean, again, the website's very simple. There's a couple of optimizations that I'm thinking about making to the backend and to the site. So be on the lookout for that. And here's one of the optimizations. This is just taking so so long, so definitely going to be optimizing our backend API and possibly migrating to a new type of data store to be able to make this faster. Thanks again for checking out the website. If you guys like what you see, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're looking for developers or just someone to collaborate with, feel free to hit me up. Thanks so much, guys. I'll catch you on the next one.